This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
You are listening to the GSMC Sports Podcast, which is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, as always. You know who it is, Kayvon. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this amazing show we got going on today. Because of you great listeners that have been so loyal to us, all of you new listeners coming along, thank you for joining as well. And we've got an awesome show in store for you guys today. I mean, jam-packed sports week. Let's start it off like this. How's everybody's week doing? I hope it's doing well. We are recording this right now on a Tuesday evening. We just saw Gonzaga whoop USC's booty, and all you USC fans out there, I'm sorry. You guys were one of the hottest teams in the nation going into this game, and Gonzaga just gave you the beatdown. And I'm not even saying that to rub it in. I'm no Gonzaga fan. I'm just speaking of what I just watched, and Gonzaga is almost unbeatable. I've watched them all year long. And it is going to take, right now, look, we've got Baylor in the Final Four playing against Houston. Gonzaga just made it. And then as I record this, Michigan and UCLA are about to tip off in about 20 minutes here, okay? So what I've learned is that it's going to take one of these teams, whether it's Michigan, whether it's UCLA, whether it's Baylor, whether it's Houston, it's going to take their very best night. It's going to take the best basketball that they've played all season to have a shot against Gonzaga. And I'm not talking about one of those situations where Gonzaga has an off night and you have a great night. No, because Gonzaga's off night is about as good as everyone else's normal night. So, if not better than everyone else's normal night, because they have so much firepower on that team led by Jalen Suggs, who in my opinion is the number one pick in the NBA draft coming up this summer. I just think he is an NBA ready player that can come in tomorrow and make an impact on your NBA team. So it's going to take a team to show up and play lights out against Gonzaga. I mean, a flawless type game to even have a shot at this team. And if none of these teams can do it, then we're going to be looking at the first team to go undefeated since Bobby Knight's Indiana team did it way back in the 70s. So, like I said, a lot to talk about tonight. Let's lay out the show, and then I'm going to dive right into it. I think you guys are going to really like this first segment that I have laid out for us today, but lots going on. First of all, how's everyone doing? How's your week doing? Are you guys having a good week? Are you? I hope so. I do. I really, really hope so. Let me know at Kayvon_sports. Reach out to me on Twitter. Let me know how you're doing, and let me know what you want to talk about as we lead into this month of April coming up. A big month of April, last month of the NBA season, right? Regular season, obviously, before we hit playoffs, mid-May-ish. The NFL draft is coming up at the end of April. That's going to be a blast. MLB, Major League Baseball, starts on Thursday, opening day on Thursday. That is going to be a lot of fun. So the sports container is overflowing once again, and that's how we love to do it, baby. That is how we love to do it. So we're going to lay out the show. We're going to get right into some more NFL talk. What's going on with the big trade? What are the San Francisco 49ers doing? They had their press conference. Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, Jimmy G, what's going to happen with him. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about the NBA, what's happening with the trade deadline. The NFL, to switch back to the gridiron real quick, they have officially announced that the season's going to be 17 games. So they're making it one extra game, one in the season. Awesome news for us fans. Awesome news for fantasy football players. Awesome news for gamblers. Pretty much awesome news for everyone except maybe the players, right? Not so fast. Players, I know some of you guys are arguing, worried about it, talking like you don't like it. I'm going to tell you guys why in a couple years you're going to be thrilled about this. You might not like it right now, but in a couple years you're going to be thrilled. So stay tuned for that, but I want to start off the show with this, okay? There's this interesting thought process that we have in life, and it's, it goes around sometimes that you don't want to be dependent, right? You always hear that, right? Whether it's your parents tell you that or you hear someone tell you how you never want to be dependent on someone. And the reality is we all are dependent on someone in some way or somehow. Now, this isn't just whether it's financially. If you just think about how your life is, how does your life go? In some way or somehow, at one point in your life, or for a majority of people throughout your entire life, you are always going to be dependent on someone and maybe multiple people. I mean, think about it through this perspective, okay? Here at GSMC, I am dependent on GSMC because I'm depending on them to my producer, Sarah. I'm depending on her to put my show together. I'm depending on her to put it out in time where the news that I'm talking about is still fresh enough, because in sports, it's such a rapid-fire world where you do one show, by the next day, by less than 24 hours, there could be so much more new information out where the show that you just did, in terms of a podcast, it's all out to date. It's all out of date now. So I'm dependent on her of getting it out in time. I'm dependent on GSMC of getting sponsorships out and making sure that my show is getting advertised and people are listening to it. But then also, GSMC is dependent on me of putting out good content, of making sure that listeners like you guys are wanting to come back and listen more, right? Of making sure that I'm doing a good job being entertaining, having a personality that is in some way or somehow attracting you guys back to me, making you guys think about me when breaking news happens. The 49ers trade up to number 3. I want you guys to be able to think, what was Kayvon's thoughts of that? It's a two-way street, right? So in the work industry, right? Say I was doing this show with a co-host. All those people out there that do shows with co-hosts, they're dependent every single day on their host showing up. Otherwise, they're in trouble. They have to do it themselves. And if they're always doing it with a host, your chemistry, you're used to that. You feed off of each other. And then you just have to go in, you're dependent when you go into work every day of your coworker being there or your boss being there. We are dependent of people in some way and somehow. And people are dependent on you. That's just how life is, right? And sometimes we get this idea that we don't need to be dependent on people. And that's just false. That's just not how life works. And when it comes to the San Francisco 49ers and Kyle Shanahan, I think that Kyle Shanahan is starting to realize this. I think that Kyle Shanahan, who is a fantastic football coach, who is one of the brightest offensive minds the NFL we have in this day, right? We maybe have had ever. He's a genius. He has seen himself be able to have immediate success with his system. Kyle Shanahan's system is one of the best systems, if not the best system, in the NFL, the offensive system, right? He did great things with Kirk Cousins, who is an average quarterback. he turned Matt Ryan, who is a above average quarterback, a very good quarterback, he turned him into a great quarterback. He turned him into an MVP winner. He turned him into a Super Bowl. He was playing in the Super Bowl. Matt Ryan was, because of Kyle Shanahan and then their teamwork together, right? So then Kyle Shanahan gets the head coaching job with the San Francisco 49ers, and within 2 years of having Jimmy Garoppolo as his quarterback, he takes the team to the Super Bowl. So I think Kyle Shanahan started to realize that my system is so great, it doesn't matter who I have at quarterback. I'm not dependent on Jimmy G or Matt Ryan. I just need a quarterback. I just need someone that can play, because I'll make it work, because that's how good my system is. But then Jimmy G kept getting hurt. And he had guys like Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard come in, and they were going 4-12, and they were going 5-11, and they were going 6-10, and 7-9. And he realized, we're not making the playoffs. We're not being above 500. We're not getting back to the Super Bowl, because Jimmy G keeps getting hurt. And even though my system is so good, I still need a really good quarterback in there to help me out. I don't need a great one. I don't need a Hall of Famer. I just need a good quarterback that can help me out. And I think Kyle Shanahan's starting to realize that. Sean McVay was the best thing since sliced bread. When the Los Angeles Rams hired him, he was the hottest thing on the block. I mean, anybody that had a cup of coffee with Sean McVay was getting hired as a head coach, right? That's how it was. And look what Sean McVay did. I mean, before he got to Los Angeles, in the first year of Jared Goff, we were talking about he might be Jamarcus Russell type bust. We were talking about his first season in the NFL was so bad, we were saying this guy is going to be a bust like Jamarcus Russell. Sean McVay got there, and he turned Jared Goff into gold. He brought him into the playoffs the immediate next year, right? Remember that? They went right to the playoffs, lost to the Falcons in that round, in the wild card round. The very next year, 2 years, with Jared Goff, he takes them to the Super Bowl. And I think Sean McVay started to realize, man, look what I can do. This is my system. Look what I just did with Jared Goff. Then a couple years goes by. He's losing to Kyle Shanahan every single year, twice a year. He's not going far in the playoffs. He misses the playoffs. Then he makes the playoffs and he can only win one game. And I think Sean McVay started to realize, okay, my system, yeah, it's really good, but it's not good enough to overcome this guy, who Jared Goff is a good quarterback, but he's not a good enough quarterback. He's not good enough. He's good enough to take us to the playoffs, but he's not good enough to take us to the promised land. He's not good enough to get us to the top of Mount Everest. Just like Kyle Shanahan realized, Jimmy G's good when he's available. Two different things we're talking about here, right? Sean McVay just doesn't believe Jared Goff can run a system well enough. Kyle Shanahan knows that Jimmy G can run his system well enough, but he's not available enough to do it. Both of these guys, so what did the Rams do? They went and said, screw this. We're getting someone that can run this system to a T. We're getting someone that is going to be able to be good enough when the system isn't working as well against some of the better teams in the playoffs. So they go out and get Matthew Stafford. Kyle Shanahan's realizing the same thing. He's saying, look, I love Jimmy Garoppolo, and I know I can get it done with him, but he's just not available enough. And when he goes down, my system is not good enough for a CJ Beathard or a Nick Mullins to come in. I am more dependent on a better quarterback. And that is why the San Francisco 49ers made this trade, ladies and gentlemen. It's not because Jimmy G is not good enough. It's because he isn't available enough. And Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are sitting there saying, man, we've done a great job with the 49ers. We came in here, we took them to the Super Bowl. But after a while, we need to look around and realize we're not getting back to the playoffs. We need to look around and realize our quarterback's getting hurt every single year. We're wasting prime years of all of this talent that we have around him because he just gets hurt every year. And the system's not good enough. So they said, we are more dependent. We need a more talented quarterback that's going to be there for us if Jimmy G gets hurt. So that's why they traded up to number 3 overall. And that's why they're going to keep Jimmy Garoppolo. Now look, if the Patriots or someone out there come and offer them a deal that is going to blow their socks away, then they're going to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. But everything that they're telling you about how they're going to keep him, believe them. They really are. Their goal is to keep him for this year. Now, they're not going to keep him after that, but their goal is to keep him for this next year. So if you see 2 weeks from now, a week from now, that they end up trading him, don't go, oh my goodness, they were lying to us. No, they just finally got an offer where they couldn't say no to. That's how this business works, okay? Yes, sometimes they are lying to us, but they're telling the truth this time because of everything that I just laid out. They like Jimmy G. They want Jimmy G. They just need an insurance policy because they are more dependent on a quarterback than they thought they were earlier in their first couple years. So what they're going to do is they're going to trade up to number 3 and they're going to draft a rookie quarterback. And they're going to let him sit behind Jimmy Garoppolo. And their ultimate plan is that Jimmy Garoppolo stays healthy and they can compete this next year with him at quarterback. And they have a good season. Maybe they can make it back to the Super Bowl. Maybe they can make it to the playoffs. Whatever. And then at the end of the year, they'll trade away Jimmy G. Or, if what's been happening, they have Jimmy G as their quarterback. And if he gets hurt, this time they have the future quarterback, the rookie stud, able to step in. And they get that process started right away with grooming him as the starter. Instead, they're not taking steps back by bringing in a CJ Beathard, by bringing in a Nick Mullins, where not only are you playing a backup, but you're also not grooming one of these guys to be your future quarterbacks. Everyone knows these guys are your backups. They're not going to be some type of starter down the road. If Jimmy G gets hurt, you're only helping your franchise in the future get closer to where you want to be in the future by grooming him sooner, right? Obviously, you're not helping your franchise into here or now. You need Jimmy G to do that. That's why they want to keep him. Their ideal plan, if everything goes the way it planned, they wrote it out, they scripted it out, is Jimmy G stays healthy for a year and they compete at a serious level. And then the following year, the rookie quarterback starts. That's their ideal plan, and that is why they made this play. This big-time move to jump up to number 3 overall. Makes all the sense in the world to me. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon. Hope everyone's having an awesome day. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, dive into a little bit more about the NFL here. A 17-game season has passed. What does that mean for the players? What does that mean for us, the fans, the media, and everyone else involved? We'll talk about it right after this.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
You are listening to the GSMC Sports Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon. Welcome to the show. wherever you are, however you're listening, and whenever you're listening. We really do appreciate you taking a little bit of time to listen to our show. It means a lot to us. Give us a like, give us a comment. Let me know you love it. Let me know you hate it. Let me know what you want to talk about. Doesn't matter. Just talk to me and I will talk back. That's how it's always been on this show. Just ask our longtime listeners. For all of you new listeners, we appreciate you guys coming in and joining us. Lot to talk about. Like I said, a beautiful week of sports here, all right? We've got the Sweet Six. I mean, I just went, think about this. This is how great sports is right now. It is March 28th, and I am doing a full-on sports podcast. And I just went through my first segment, and I didn't even mention March Madness. March 28th, we are in the heart of the Sweet 16. Teams are filling up the Elite Eight left and right, and I didn't even mention March Madness. That is how much we have going on in the sports world right now with the NFL and just the crazy trades going on with the NBA and the trade deadlines. The Brooklyn Nets, sorry for all you in Brooklyn. The Brooklyn Nets are trying to build a Toon Squad out of the Looney Tunes, out of Space Jams. I mean, just adding every possible player that they can. I mean, they're becoming the Monstars. It's insane. Other teams are selling off players left and right, like the Orlando Magic. They're sitting there saying, who do we have left to play? Teams are getting better. Teams are getting worse. The Houston Rockets are sitting there, blowing 18-point leads in the fourth quarter. It's just chaos. It's absolute chaos. And boy, is it great to be a sports fan right now. It is absolutely a great time to be a sports fan right now. Speaking of the Sweet 16, yesterday 4 teams. What am I saying? We had Houston in Syracuse's, I guess it was kind of a Cinderella run. I mean, it's Syracuse, it's Jim Boeheim. It's not much of a Cinderella, but they were an 11 seed. They did barely make the tournament. And then, of course, Jim Boeheim and his Syracuse team does what they always do. And as an 11 seed, they go on and win a bunch of games. But Houston, who played fantastic, put it into that. They're moving on. They're playing the true Cinderella, Oregon State. Oregon State was picked to be last in the Pac-12 this year. And since they started that Pac-12 tournament a couple weeks ago, they just can't lose. They are playing outstanding basketball, and they could beat Houston if they keep playing the way they are. Arkansas ends the true Cinderella of the whole tournament in Oral Roberts. I mean, and they barely beat them. Oral Roberts had a 12-point lead on Arkansas, and once again, Arkansas found a way to come back. Arkansas has been down by 10 or more points in every game so far this tournament, and they've come back and won all 3 of those games, which is lucky for me because I picked Arkansas to go to the Final Four, and the team that's looking like they're going to try and get in the way of that is Baylor, who looks just outstanding right now, absolutely putting a beating on Villanova. Villanova had a lead for most of that game, and then Baylor, if you watch that, Baylor put the defensive clamps down on Villanova and just took over on the defensive side of the ball, causing turnovers, causing havoc. Villanova was all out of place. To Villanova's credit, they were down a couple of key players to injuries, but Baylor was phenomenal. So that side of the bracket is set. You've got Baylor versus Arkansas, which will be I'm telling you, if you have not sat down to watch a lot of these games yet, sit down for that game. That game will be maybe one of the best games, if not the best game of the whole tournament. Then you have Houston and Oregon State. The winner of those 2 matchups will play each other for the Final Four. And then today, we'll find out who's on the other side of the Elite Eight. Gonzaga against Creighton. Gonzaga should beat Creighton pretty easily, I would say. After that, you have USC and Oregon, 2 Pac-12 teams going at it. After that, you've got Michigan and Florida State, my favorite game of the weekend. I cannot wait for that game. And then to end out the weekend, you've got Alabama against UCLA. So a lot of great stuff going on in March Madness, which has been a phenomenal tournament. And then a lot going on the NFL side of things as well. Again, 2 big trades. The San Francisco 49ers are moving up to number 3. Miami Dolphins moved back to 12 and then decided to move back up to 6, where Philadelphia is moving to 12. So, as I mentioned in segment 1, 2 things right off the bat that we can say are evident. 1, Miami is all in on Tua Tagovailoa. They are the reports all about them loving Tua was true, and they are sticking with Tua, and they are going to build around Tua. Also, they are in phenomenal shape. Even if Tua doesn't work out, they have so many draft picks and so many assets where they will be able to get another franchise quarterback or draft another one in next year or the following year if need be. So that's one with Tua. Number 2, Eagles are all in on Jalen Hurts for the near future as they trade back to try and get more assets, more picks to build around him. So those are 2 things that we know we can seal up, put them in the box, lock it, sit it away. Facts, right? What else do we know from this trade? And this is what I was talking about before we went to break. That number 4 overall pick becomes so fascinating that the Atlanta Falcons have. The Atlanta Falcons are in a really interesting and I think good situation because this is why. They still have a good quarterback in Matt Ryan. A lot of people like to hate on Matt Ryan, but the truth is Matt Ryan has been an MVP. He's made it to the Super Bowl. He's thrown for at least 4,000 yards every single year. And we have seen when he has a good coach, he can be a top 5 quarterback in the entire league. And now he has a really good offensive coach again in Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith, for all of you guys that don't know, he runs a very identical, a close to, it's not the exact same, but it's very similar scheme as Kyle Shanahan does. Kyle Shanahan was Matt Ryan's offensive coordinator the year he was the MVP and the year they went to the Super Bowl. Okay, so just put those 2 together. All right, Matt Ryan, who will have Julio Jones, who will have Calvin Ridley, who will have Hayden Hurst. They just went out and signed Mike Davis, good running back. They've got Russell Gage, good slot receiver. They have weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Now you bring in a really good offensive play caller. They have a good situation. So the question becomes, Atlanta Falcons, do you want to draft for the future? Let me tell you this. The Falcons are a team that they don't usually find themselves picking in the top 5. They have only picked inside the top 5 twice since 1999. Twice. In 1999, they picked in the top 5 and they picked Michael Vick. And then in 2008, they picked in the top 5 and they picked Matt Ryan. So the 2 times before this that they found themselves inside the top 5 of the draft, they took a quarterback. Now they're here again. Do they take a quarterback to groom under Matt Ryan, just like we were talking about with what Mahomes and Alex Smith did in Kansas City? Because this is one thing that's also evident and true. I mean, this is sealed away facts. The Atlanta Falcons will be starting Matt Ryan under center this year. His cap hit is too big. And honestly, it's too big next year too. So in all likelihood, Matt Ryan will be a Falcon for the next 2 years. So that becomes the question. Because of that, do they really want to get a quarterback and have him sit for a year, maybe even 2, even though it's really rare to draft a quarterback that high and make him sit for 2 years? Sitting for 1 year, totally understandable. 2, that's tough. The only time we've seen that happen was with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. And remember, Aaron Rodgers he slid down the draft. He was not picked in the top 5. Even though he was a top 5 worthy talent, he ended up sliding down. So do they want to do that, take their future quarterback since they're there, or do they want to trade down? Do they want to hear an offer from Denver? Do they want to hear an offer from New England? Or do they want to hear an offer from Carolina, who's in their division? Remember, it would take a lot for them to have to make a deal with Carolina. So I honestly scratch that. I don't see that happening. The third option, do they want to take someone right there that's not a quarterback? There are some really good players in this draft. Kyle Pitts. Everyone is talking about this guy being one of the best tight end prospects they've ever studied. And I agree. Do they want to take an offensive lineman, Penei Sewell? Look, Arthur Smith, he loves to run the ball. You can always get better in the run game if you take a guy like Penei Sewell. Do they want to take someone like that? These are all things. The Falcons are in a very lucrative situation because they have so many options, right? If they love someone at number 4, they should stay there and take them. If they're a little iffy, might as well trade back and get assets. So that's where the draft begins in my mind. Now, let's talk more about this 49ers side of things, okay? They traded up. They gave away 2 future first-round picks and a third-round pick to go up to number 3. Adam Schefter reported after the trade that the 49ers are still saying Jimmy G is their guy. He is their guy, and they are not parting ways with him. That's what Adam Schefter reported. That becomes really interesting to me. And I'm going to take them by their word. I'm going to take them at their word. If they're saying that, I believe it. I do. There's no reason for me not to. They've never done anything where they've, said something and a couple days later they've changed it. For right now, I'm taking them at their word. I believe them when they say it. Now, what that means, though, it kind of opens up the idea of that Alex Smith type role, right? Where Jimmy G would be an advisor role, mentor role to whoever they take at the 3rd pick overall. He learns behind Jimmy G. As I said, the Falcons could be in that same situation at 4 with Matt Ryan. But what I find interesting, though, because if you go up to number 3, which they obviously did, this is something to note. Justin Fields, quarterback of Ohio State, his pro day is on Tuesday, so that hasn't happened yet. All right, Trey Lance had his pro day last week, and Zach Wilson had his on Friday. Even though I believe the Jets are taking him at number 2, the 49ers made this trade before Wilson went and threw the ball on Friday. So they made this trade before watching Wilson at his pro day and before watching Justin Fields at his pro day. Now listen, again, these pro days don't mean anything, all right? But it is part of the process. They have pro days for a reason, okay? If he does great, if he does bad, I understand that a lot of people don't think that affects his draft stock, and it shouldn't, but it is part of the process. So I find it very interesting that the 49ers made this trade before even watching Wilson's pro day and before watching Fields' pro day. So what does that tell me? It tells me what I thought beforehand anyways, and this just kind of adds a little spice to it. I think that they're planning on taking Trey Lance. I think this kind of confirms that Trey Lance is going to be at the very least a top 5 pick because they're not making this move without getting an idea from Jacksonville and the Jets what they are doing. Look, obviously Jacksonville's taking Trevor Lawrence, right? And I'm sure the 49ers believe that the Jets are taking Zach Wilson, but I also think they're thinking, okay, if they don't take Zach Wilson, we like him, so we'll take him. So the 49ers traded up with the idea that they will have their pick of Trey Lance and Justin Fields. Now, obviously, the Jets could still trade out of their pick as well if Carolina, for instance, and we've talked about Carolina's owner, David Tepper, on this show many times. He's a go-getter. He is a go-getter. He made his money by taking risks. When he wants something, he goes and gets it. A go-getter. If he offers the Jets and Joe Douglas a godfather of an offer that they can't say no to, because remember, they have Sam Darnold still, the Jets just might take that offer. Because again, they can't trade with the Falcons because the Falcons are in their division. The Carolina Panthers are in a very tough spot now. And I love it. I'm sorry. I mean, I know I'm from North Carolina, but you guys all know I'm a Falcons fan. I'm a Falcons fan. And it's funny to see this position that they're in. So what are they going to do? They could trade up and take an all-monster offer and move up to number 2, but the question becomes, how much do the Jets love Zach Wilson? I believe that the Jets stay at number 2 and take Zach Wilson. In all likelihood, I think that's what happens. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. But what this tells me, because Jimmy Garoppolo not part of any package being moved, and you have John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers organization confirming or affirming that Jimmy Garoppolo is their man for next year, because they could move. They could move him. If they wanted to, they could move him. He has such a small cap hit right now that it would be easy for them to move him. But they clearly don't want to do that, right? I mean, that's what they're telling us. So they're committed to him for next year, which brings me back to why I think they're taking Trey Lance. It tells me they are taking on a project. Someone who might not quite be as polished as maybe a Justin Fields or a Zach Wilson or Trevor Lawrence to play on the professional level yet, like Pat Mahomes was when he came out. Remember, everyone loved Mahomes' skill set and his pure raw arm talent, but you didn't know how it was going to translate in the NFL. So you gave him a year under Alex Smith, boom, the rest is history. I think the 49ers are going to go down that same exact route with Jimmy G and hope that they can move him after the season. Look, it's a callous business. The NFL is a very callous business. You know, it sucks for Jimmy G because it looks like he's not their future anymore after signing a $100 million deal a few years ago. But it's just the nature of the business. If they feel like you've hit your ceiling, they'll move on from you. And especially even now with that quarterback position. And when it pertains to Jimmy G, I don't even know if the 49ers feel like they hit their ceiling with him. I don't believe that. I just think that he gets hurt too much. He isn't available enough. He has only been able to finish one full season with the 49ers. And that was 2 years ago when they went all the way to the Super Bowl. Other than that, he just can't stay healthy. He is fragile. And the most important ability in the NFL is availability. And I think that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are sitting there looking at this situation and saying, man, we have too much talent on this team to be picking in the top 15 like this. But we keep finding ourselves here because our quarterback keeps getting hurt. So if you stuck some truth serum in John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan right now, I think that's what they would tell you. And I think they're telling you that Jimmy G just can't stay healthy. We love the guy. He's a great talent. He's a great player. He's a great leader. But he just can't stay healthy. And at the end of the day, that is hurting us. So they decided to make this move. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami. Hope everyone's having a lovely, lovely weekend. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll finish things up with the NFL, and we will move on to the NBA and talk winners and losers of the NBA trade deadline. Be right back after this.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
You are listening to the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami. We enter segment number 3 here. 2 more to go, 3 and 4, and then we are done. I hope everyone's enjoying the show. I hope everyone's having a phenomenal weekend and early part of your week. And depending on when you're listening to this, really enjoy it. Easter's coming up. Hopefully you get a nice little break. My birthday's coming up on the 30th. If any of you want to send me over some gifts, really appreciate all that and all of the love that you guys have been sending me and GSMC for just the great content that we've all been putting out as of late. We wouldn't be able to keep putting this content out if it wasn't for you guys. So as always, reach out to me on Twitter at Kayvon_sports. Reach out to me on the company page at GSMC_sports and let me know what you want to talk about. DM me or just tweet me. I have a lot of people, guys and girls, that do that, and we truly will mention whatever sport or topic you guys will want to talk about, and we'll give you a shout out in it. Have a little bit of debate, have a little conversation, have some fun with it, of course. So here we go from here. All right. Again, big time trades happening in the NFL, which have been a lot of fun. And I just kind of want to wrap up this whole talk on the trades and what has happened. The draft order now, as we look at it from the early part, you got the Jaguars at 1, the Jets at 2, the San Francisco 49ers at 3, Falcons at 4, Bengals at 5. That's another interesting spot, right? Because, as we've said, there's 4 quarterbacks that we like in our top 1 tier. Say the Falcons decide to keep that number 4 overall pick, but say they don't trade out. I mean, say they don't take a quarterback. Say they do take Kyle Pitts. Say they do take Penei Sewell. That number 5 spot then becomes really interesting on draft night, okay? Because right now, most of these teams, like the Panthers, like the Broncos, like the Patriots, possibly the Bears, if they could reach up, they all believe that the Falcons are taking a quarterback. They do believe that. So, say we're at draft night, and the Jaguars take Lawrence, the Jets take Wilson, the 49ers take Lance, and now here comes the Atlanta Falcons, and they come up to the podium, and Roger Goodell says, with the 4th overall pick, the Atlanta Falcons are taking Kyle Pitts. Well, then, Cincinnati's phones will start blowing up. Their phones will blow up from Carolina, from Denver, because Justin Fields will still be available. So then you will see a team like Carolina jump up to 5, or a team like Denver trying to get in front of Carolina jump up to 5, or maybe even New England. You never know. You will see that start to happen if the Falcons pass on the 4th quarterback there, which is why I say the NFL draft really begins at number 4 overall a week, or actually a month from now. I was going to say a month and a week from now, but if you look at the calendar, it really is about a month. I mean, it's the 29th of April is the first round of the NFL draft. So we're getting close to it. So that's what's going to be fascinating. And then with the 49ers, as I said, they're looking at Jimmy G, and they're saying, I don't believe that they're saying we hit our ceiling with this player. I think they're just saying he just gets hurt too much. He just gets hurt too much. And as I said in this show, in the last segment, the best type of ability is your availability. If you cannot stay on that football field, your talent, your value ends up declining. It just does. You can be the most talented player ever. If you can't stay healthy, your value truly ends up declining because you just can't stay on that football field. And I think that the San Francisco 49ers are sitting there saying this: we're going to trade up to number 3, and we're going to take Trey Lance or Justin Fields or whoever you think at quarterback, and we're going to have him sit behind Jimmy G. And it's a win-win, because if Jimmy G stays healthy, well then our roster is good enough to make the Super Bowl. We showed you that 2 years ago. They have pretty much the exact same roster still. Yeah, they lost a couple pieces in the back end. They need to fix up their secondary. But they still have that great pass rush. They got better on the offensive line, signing Trent Williams to that massive deal. You know, they had some really good receivers and obviously George Kittle, the tight end. They've got Brandon Ayuk, who really came on the scene this year with backup quarterbacks throwing him the ball because Jimmy G was hurt. So he'll even thrive more if Jimmy G's out there. He's been a phenomenal receiver in fantasy, because I love fantasy, and regular football. So they've got studs on that team. So they're looking at and saying, we'll have this quarterback, this young quarterback, sit for a year, learn. Jimmy G will groom him, and we can do all that while winning. And if Jimmy G gets hurt once again, well, then we'll throw our rookie quarterback into the fire and let him learn that way. And it will fasten the process of him getting out there and being a legit quarterback. So it's a very good spot. I understand why the 49ers did it. It makes sense. If I'm a 49ers fan, I'm happy about it. I am. I'm happy about it. And if I'm a Dolphins fan, I'm really happy because the Dolphins are set up in a beautiful situation moving forward with all the picks and players and just the phenomenal head coach they have, who I've talked about many times in Brian Flores. So that's kind of my whole thought on how this works. And again, I do believe, now things can change in a month, but I do believe right now Trey Lance is the guy. I really do believe Trey Lance is the guy. And we talk about it being a callous business, and it is. And the hard truth to that is, and this is so true, guys. I mean, this is so true. In all likelihood, 2 or 3 of the top 5 QBs in this draft, Lawrence, Wilson, Lance, Fields, Jones, Mac Jones, the truth is, half of them will probably be a bust. I hate to say that. I really do. That's just how it is. That's the NFL. And all of these guys have question marks. Even Trevor Lawrence, who I believe will be a stud, but still, if you look at everyone else, Zach Wilson, he had some serious injuries prior to this year. He also played some really weak competition in college, being out there at BYU. How's that going to translate in the NFL? Trey Lance, incredibly weak competition, being at an FCS school in college. Justin Fields, he is known as a one-read type of guy who had some alarmingly bad moments in some really big games in college. Mac Jones, who is a statue. He isn't mobile. He played with some of the most talented college football players ever on that Alabama team. Does that help him or does that hurt him? Because he's going to go to a team in these early if he gets picked early, that probably doesn't have as much talent as that Alabama team did, right? It's going to be a learning curve for him. So there's a rawness to all 5 of these quarterbacks. Now, nobody really knows what the 49ers are thinking, but just the nature of the business, half of these guys are going to be a bust. They just are. History tells us that. Statistics tell us that. And look, we don't want it to happen. I hope this is a historic draft class and everyone's great. I don't want anyone to be bad. A once-in-a-lifetime draft class, that would be awesome. But in reality, a couple of these guys just aren't going to pan out. And we don't know which ones those are going to be, and that's what makes the draft such an inexact science. I don't think it'll be Trevor Lawrence, but it could be. I don't think it will be Zach Wilson because he's looking really good, and he's got a confidence about him as a player that I really like. But how is all of that going to translate to the top of the line, the best of the best NFL level? The NFL is a completely different game. And sometimes you get in a situation that doesn't work for you. You know, sometimes it's not even you. Sometimes you just go to an awful... We see that with Sam Darnold. Right now, Sam Darnold looks like a bust. He was the number 3 overall pick a couple years ago, and he looks like a bust. And in all likelihood, he's going to get shipped out of New York, and he's going to go somewhere, and we're going to find out if it was him or if he was just on a insanely bad football team that was coached, that had a bad coach, Adam Gase. It's just true. The roster management was terrible. He couldn't stay healthy. He had no weapons. He had no offensive line. The defense was bad. That's just that he could go to Carolina or somewhere and be great. He could. Sometimes it's you just get in a bad situation. And sometimes you just don't translate to that NFL level, to that NFL speed. All of these are just factors that we have to understand as we head into the NFL draft. And also something that we overlook all the time, if you are successful, how do you handle that? It's hard to handle success, ladies and gentlemen. It really is. How do you handle success? And how do you handle whatever potential adversity is going to come your way? That's what I want to know. Because you can build a good team around an above average quarterback and still win a lot of football games. You might not be able to win a Super Bowl unless you build a great team. It's very rare for that. But if you have the right mindset, you can play in this league for a long, long time. You don't have to be a Peyton Manning. You don't have to be a Tom Brady. You don't have to be an Aaron Rodgers. You could be a Kirk Cousins and make millions and millions of dollars in the NFL and set you and your family up for a long time. It's not always about being a stud and the best to ever do it. It's just about being good enough to get your team by. But there's a lot that goes into it. You have to be able to handle success, the people around you, that mindset. And those are all things that we just don't know. That we just do not know. And the hard truth with, as we've said, this is a callous business. The hard truth is half of these guys are going to be bust. That's just how it is every time. And you know what else is so funny about the draft? There will also be some guy that we're not talking about that gets picked in the 4th round or the 5th round that ends up becoming a great player. I mean, this always happens too. Like the year where, I think it was 2016, Carson Wentz, Jared Goff goes number 1 overall, Carson Wentz goes number 2 overall, Dak Prescott goes in the 4th round, right? That Tom Brady goes in the 6th round. Like stuff like that always ends up in the 2018 draft. Josh Allen goes 7 overall, which is still high, but if you remember before that, Baker Mayfield went 1 overall, Sam Darnold went 2 overall, Josh Allen went 7, and Lamar Jackson went 32nd overall. He got picked as the last pick in the 1st round. And who are the 2 best quarterbacks in that draft? The 7th overall in Josh Allen and the 32nd overall in Lamar Jackson. Sometimes these quarterbacks that you don't expect, that we don't talk about, that we don't put as much attention on, they end up becoming the best ones. So that's what I love about the draft. It's an inexact science. It really is. You can do it, and these teams will. These teams will. They will do so much research. They will do everything. They will know these players' backgrounds left and right. I mean, they will know when you use the bathroom every day. They just will. That's how it works. If you've ever done something bad in your life, they will know about it, so you might as well not hide it. They'll find it. And they'll put all this time into it, and it still means absolutely nothing because you just can't predict what an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid is going to do when you hand him $6 million and the keys to a $1 billion franchise. That's right. You're not handing them just a nice Buick. No. You're handing them the keys to a brand new Lamborghini. And you're telling them good luck. That's tough. Put yourself in those shoes. That is a tough situation. But that's the nature of the business, baby. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon. We're going to take one last break. And then when we come back, we are going to end the show on some NBA talk, baby. I'm going to give you guys my winners. I'm going to give you guys my losers. Can anyone beat the Nets now that the moves that they have made? The Lakers are adding Andre Drummond. What does this mean for them? We're going to end this whole segment number 4 all about the NBA. Don't go anywhere. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
You are listening to the final segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami. Hope everyone is having a fantastic day, fantastic week, whenever you're listening to this podcast, however and wherever. We do appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your busy day to tune into us. And what a show it's been. I mean, I started off the show telling you guys how this is what I love about being in this business. This is why I wanted to do sports talk radio since I was a kid. Sports talk, podcast, TV, whatever it is, you name it. This is what I've always wanted to do because of days like this. Because of days where you're just chilling, right? You're sitting there, you're working, you're watching what's on TV, and then boom, there you see the scroll at the bottom of ESPN. You see the tweet come up. You see the text from your friend. Can you believe what just happened? Can you believe what the 49ers just did? Or your friend that's a fan of the Dolphins. What a move by the Dolphins. Or your friend that's a fan of the Eagles. What are the Eagles doing? I wanted to take Kyle Pitts at number 6 overall. Or your friend that's a fan of the 49ers. What are we doing? We have Jimmy G. Right? These mix of emotions. That's what this business is all about. Just kind of sitting there and taking all this in. And then you got to sit back and say, okay, now let's break it down. Let's break it down. And the same exact thing that happened on Friday for the NFL was happening all week on Thursday mainly for the NBA. And that was the NBA trade deadline. I mean, the NBA trade deadline was fascinating. This was one of the busiest trade deadlines I can remember. We had players, and not just players, some very high caliber players getting traded left and right. There are fans all around that are happy or scratching their head, right? That's kind of how the trade deadline works. You know, we sit here and we grade these trades. We say, oh, they made this move. Oh, they made that move. We say, why did this team not make a move? Why is this team selling off their players, right? That's what we do. That's what the trade deadline's all about. And there is a lot of stuff to nitpick about here. There just is. And that's what we're going to do, right? That's what we're going to do here. And look, I mean, maybe there are fans in Chicago that are pretty excited. And in Orlando, if you're Steve Clifford, the head coach, you're looking at your roster going, who the hell am I about to play? As they completely tore up their roster. A lot of moves at the trade deadline yesterday came from Orlando unloading a lot of their players because Orlando, and I don't blame them for this. See, the NBA is a very interesting league. The fascinating thing about the NFL is you have your great teams, right, that can win a championship. And the thing with the NFL, there's only a small number of those teams that can actually win it all. You have a bunch of teams that can contend and that could, put up a good series, but the teams that really can win it all, I mean, you look at it, the Lakers, the Nets, those are obviously the two most popular teams and the teams with the most talent. And then you have that's tier one, right? Then you have the Sixers and the Bucks. And on the west side, you have the Clippers, and some people think the Jazz or the Nuggets. But truly, the teams that can win it all, in my opinion, it's the Nets and the Lakers, Clippers, Sixers, Bucks, maybe Heat, right? So that's about 5-6 teams. Then you have the teams that can maybe make a playoff run, right? The Utah Jazz, the Phoenix Suns, the Milwaukee Bucks, as I said, Miami Heat. Could the Atlanta Hawks make a run? Teams like that could get hot. The Denver Nuggets, obviously, they made a run last year. Portland Trailblazers. Those are the type of teams that they get into the playoffs and they could genuinely make a run in the playoffs. Then you have the teams that are just trying to make the playoffs. And they know that even though if they make it, they're not going to go anywhere. Right? But just for ticket sales, for, you get more money for your players, you want to make the playoffs. And then you have the teams that are just terrible. Houston Rockets, Minnesota Timberwolves. The Orlando Magic were always in that tier of making the playoffs or missing it by a couple games. They were always in, and that's the worst tier you can be in because you're good enough to make the playoffs, but you're not bad enough to get a high draft pick. So the Magic finally said, you know what, screw this. We're going to unload all of our good players, and we're going to be one of the worst teams in the league for a couple years, and we're going to get high draft picks and build through the draft. The Thunder are doing the same thing right now. That's the way to do it. If it sucks to be in that tier where you're just sitting there, right? You're good enough to make the playoffs, but you're not good enough to do anything in the playoffs, and you're not bad enough to get a really good pick in the draft. So the Orlando Magic said, we're done being that team, let's sell all out. And I respect that, I understand that. And it sucks for fans to kind of put your head around that, but in the long run, it is the smart move. And that's kind of where we are. So we saw Orlando ship off a lot of players. Chicago, baby. Chicago made some great moves. Very, very impressed with what Chicago did. They got Nikola Vucevic. He goes to Chicago, and you put him now, who Chicago still has Lauri Markkanen, but Vucevic is a way, way better Lauri Markkanen. That's what Lauri Markkanen was supposed to be. He hasn't turned into that player yet. And most importantly, which is what I have wanted for so long, you now have someone to pair with Zach LaVine. That's a hell of a pick and pop, a pick and roll combination between Zach and LaVine and Vucevic. Like, I'm glad to see Zach LaVine play with someone. Otto Porter, he's been injured. Wendell Carter, he's been injured. You ship those guys out plus a couple first-round picks. This is what Chicago needed. That is a win for Chicago. I really like what Chicago did. Victor Oladipo, he ends up moving on to his third team this season. That is now the Miami Heat, which is where he wanted to be. We'll discuss that too in a moment. Aaron Gordon, another Magic player, gets shipped off to Denver in a very interesting move, just like JaVale McGee. He also goes to Denver. Remember, JaVale was on the Lakers championship team last year, and he was a big part of that. So they build up their front court with Aaron Gordon and JaVale McGee. And then one of my favorite moves of the deadline, Norman Powell. The Raptors ship him off to Portland, which is a big-time move for Portland. Trade George Hill, I mean, would it really be an NBA trade deadline if George Hill doesn't get traded? I feel like he gets traded every single deadline. So he gets off. He goes from the Thunder to the Sixers. They get help with their point guard play. Rajon Rondo goes to the Clippers, back to LA. On paper, that's a really good move. The Clippers, they need a leader. They need a floor general. Kawhi and PG are not that. They're not leaders. So they bring in Rondo, and on paper that seems great, but I'm not so sold on that. We'll have to dive into that as we go more, but I'm not sure the personality-wise that it meshes very well. It's going to be interesting to see him along Kawhi and Paul George. Rondo, he hasn't played a lot this year. Obviously, he was on the Hawks. So, all in all, 44 different players were traded. The most on any date in the last 30 seasons at the trade deadline. Most on any date. 44 players. That's a lot. The one name, though, that did not move, Kyle Lowry. There was so much talk about Kyle Lowry and what a difference maker he seemed to be. Like the biggest name that could be on the move, right? It was Kyle Lowry. A lot of teams were interested in him. But the price was too high. The price was way too high. And as of, Brian Windhorst reported that it was going to take the 76ers giving the Raptors two young players, Matisse Thybulle, a really nice 3-and-D player. Also, Tyrese Maxey, who's a rookie with a lot of offensive upside. But they also wanted to go with those two players, 2 first-round picks, which is crazy. I love Kyle Lowry, I really do. He's a champion. He's an all-star. He's a great player. But he's 35 years old on an expiring contract. So not only would you have had to give all that up for him, but you would have had to pay him probably $25 million a year to keep him. That's just too much. That's just too much. And I think Masai Ujiri, the GM of the Raptors, was okay with not trading him. That's why they offered so much. I think at the end of the day, they said, let's put him out there. Let's see if we can get a king's ransom in return. And if we can't, fine, we'll bring him back. He's the greatest Raptor in franchise history. We'll re-sign him. We'll bring him back, whatever. And no one wanted to bite on that massive offer, which I understand. I do think the Lakers should have traded for him. If the reports are true that it was going to take Dennis Schroeder, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Talen Horton-Tucker, and the reason why they didn't make the move was because of Talen Horton-Tucker. I love THT, I do. I think he's a great player, but he's not a superstar in this league. They could have really used Kyle Lowry. I personally would have offered them THT and Pope and kept Schroeder and see if they would have done that deal. But it's okay. I mean, the Lakers, I think, should have made that move, but they didn't. It is what it is. So we always do this after the trade deadline. The teams that made moves, and you're like, well, what's a win? And then the teams that made a move, and you're like, that's probably a loss. And then the teams that made no moves, you think that's a loss as well, right? So let's do some winners and losers from the trade deadline. All right, you guys ready for this? First winner, I go Miami Heat. We're going to Miami. Look, I understand a lot of people are down on Victor Oladipo, and his value's been dropping. I've heard a lot of experts talk about the fact that he hasn't been the same since his gruesome injury. His efficiency has gone down offensively. He still is not the same defender. But I like him alongside Jimmy Butler. I like the fact that the Miami Heat did not have to give up Duncan Robinson or Tyler Hero to get him. That's the main thing. I'm not that high personally on Oladipo. I think he's a good player. But I do think in this Miami Heat system, in this Miami Heat culture that Pat Riley has created so well, I do think he'll do really well there. And based on the fact they gave up so little to get him, it's a massive win in my eyes. And I think that puts Miami back into that tier in the tier 1 of the Eastern Conference. I really do. I think that really helps Miami out a lot. So that's one move that I love. where you have, that tier where you have Philly, the Brooklyn, Milwaukee, and now Miami, Chicago. I think Chicago's a winner. We just went through this, but Zach LaVine, I love him. He's an all-star. You have him with Vucevic. They should combine for 50 points a night. It's a perfect pick and roll, pick and pop player for Zach LaVine. You still have Kobe White. You still have youth in their backcourt. They still have some tradable assets down the road if they want to bring in another star. Now, this doesn't thrust them into contention in the East or anything, but what it does, it makes them a playoff team. It makes them a playoff team, and it puts them steps in the right direction. It really does. Puts them in some good steps in the right direction, and it makes them a legit playoff team now that can cause issues in the playoffs. So those are two teams that I think are flat-out winners. Now, I also would add Denver in there. I think that Denver needed to make a big move, and that's what they just did. They got Aaron Gordon and JaVale McGee. Aaron Gordon is a great defender, someone that can go out there and guard a Kawhi Leonard, go out there and guard a Paul George, a Donovan Mitchell, and they needed that. They also brought in JaVale McGee. They needed more size down low, especially now that the Los Angeles Lakers just went out in the buyout market and got Andre Drummond. That's going to be someone that these West teams are going to have to deal with down low in rebounding the ball. So they went out and got a JaVale McGee to compete with him, and they got a good defender and also a decent offensive player in Aaron Gordon. And they, more importantly, see, this is the thing with the trade deadline. You have to look at what did these teams give up. Right? Miami got Oladipo, who's a 20-plus point a game player, and they didn't have to give up barely anything to get him. Aaron Gordon, they got Aaron Gordon, and the Denver Nuggets did, and they didn't have to give up Michael Porter Jr., right? They gave up Gary Harris, who's a great a good shooter, but he has been really up and down the last couple years. So they got rid of him. So those are wins in my eyes. Now, the losers, the biggest loser to me, it's the Clippers. It's the Celtics. I don't like what the Celtics did. Look, the Celtics, they went out and got Evan Fournier. He's a good offensive player. He can put the ball on the ground. He can shoot the three. He is a good offensive player. But man, oh man, how many times have we looked at this Celtics team with Danny Ainge and we've said they have all these picks, they have all these young assets, all these players, and they're going to get Anthony Davis, they're going to get Kawhi Leonard. They don't get either of them. Oh, okay, they're going to go get Kyrie. They do. They lose him after a year. They have managed to not get anyone but the players they drafted and Kemba, who I like. Kemba's good. And they've just been a big disappointment. They have been a massive disappointment. They have too much talent for being the 8th seed in the East right now, for being below 500, and they needed to go out and make a serious move. And the best that Danny Ainge could have done was went out and got Evan Fournier. I don't like the move. I thought that they should have got Vucevic. I thought that they should have gotten someone, maybe Aaron Gordon, someone more high caliber. Again, Fournier's a good player. He will contribute. But they also trade away Daniel Tice, who now Tristan Thompson and Robert Williams is their best big men down low. That's an issue. To me, Boston could have done better with what they did, and they just didn't do enough. I think that Boston was, I wish they would have done more. And then my only other one, and this isn't a loser, but it's just kind of like, why? And that's the Phoenix Suns. I kind of, the West right now is interesting. The Lakers are hurt. Will Anthony Davis and LeBron come back healthy? We don't know. And the Suns are sitting there in second place. They legit could win the West. They really could. And I kind of wish they went out and made a move to solidify that, to make that even more of a closer chance. But they didn't. And that's fine. Again, they are young and talented, and they've got a lot of good pieces moving forward, but it's just a situation where you could have seen them gone out and make a bit of a bigger move if need be, right? But they didn't. And again, that's totally fine. But it's just, that's kind of just me nitpicking at it. I think mainly the biggest loser was the Boston Celtics and obviously the Houston Rockets. The Houston Rockets are a disaster. They gave up James Harden for practically nothing. In that James Harden deal, they picked Victor Oladipo, and he's already gone. That is an issue. You can't. They ended up getting pretty much just first-round picks, which are all going to be very low first-round picks because the Nets are going to be very good all of these years. So that the fact that they traded away one of the best, top 3 players in the NBA right now, and they practically only got first-round picks for him and not legit players to build your team around, is a major fail on the Houston Rockets organization. A major fail. And if I'm a Houston Rockets fan, I am extremely disappointed with how things have turned out this year. Under new management, because remember, Daryl Morey is not there anymore. He's gone. This is Steven Silas' first year as head coach. I feel bad for him. He has no players to help him out. And they're going to be bad for a long time. And now they're in the Cade Cunningham first overall pick sweepstakes, and we'll see what happens from here. But that is something you can't trade away a player like James Harden and get nothing in return like that. That is all, folks. I appreciate everyone for tuning in today. What a great show. I really, really thought it was a good one. Lots going on in the sports world. Sit back, enjoy your Sweet 16. Rest of those games. Enjoy the Elite 8 tomorrow and Tuesday. Enjoy some more NFL offseason shenanigans. Enjoy some NBA and as we get deeper into the NBA and NHL season. But thank you for listening to the GSMC Sports Podcast, which is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us out. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night and a great start of your week. We'll talk to you later on.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.